Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I wanted to paint up some new Trench Crusade models. These are some new ones from the Great Maw sub-faction that just came out. They're pretty cool, they got a lot of body horror, and I think they're very interesting. But the main point of today's video is to talk about kind of creating your own painting process. Basically taking other people's tutorials or other people's stylings on how they like to paint and kind of making it your own. It's taken me a while over a lot of models to figure out how I like to paint things, and that's what we're going to do today. Normally when we're looking to paint something, we would say, okay, let me YouTube how do I paint this Space Marine, or how do I paint this specific model, and you'll get usually a bunch of different videos like, hey, this is how you paint it the box art way, or this is how you paint it my specific way, or this is how you do zenithal, this is how you do contrast, this is how you do basic acrylic. There's a million different ways to paint something usually, but over time when you start painting stuff like this, you'll figure out which ways you like to do things, and you only really figure that out by trying. So when we're talking about finding your own painting process, you basically start by, when we talk about painting processes or the way you paint something, normally what we'll do is we'll start at YouTube, or we'll start at Reddit or an image, and we'll say, okay, how did this person paint this? And if there's a video, we'll watch it. If there's documentation, we'll read it, and we will sometimes follow it step by step. And after you painting things a few different ways, or one way a few different times, you realize what you like, what you don't like, what's easy for you, what works with the tools you have, etc. For models like this, what I will normally fall back on is a few different key steps to making my painting process easier and more efficient. The first one is colored primer. So this is very simple. It's just basically adding a paint to your black, gray, or white primer, saving a step of your priming process. You don't have to base coat after this. And it also kind of helps me set the tone for the rest of the models. My general thematic tone for these models will be a green, like a necrotic green skin, so purple really works nicely as an undertone for that green. All I'm really doing here is using a general zenithal of greens to build up to a very light kind of necrotic green, whereas and then I'm going to more focus that into light points around the model. What I'm actually doing here is I'm building up my colors to filter them, so everything's going to be super bright before I go to my wash step, which is a good technique. You see a lot if you watch Marco Frazzoni. He paints like this a lot. I think it's great because not only does the wash help us with our recessing, but we can use it to filter our stuff down, and it really, if we use the right colors, it'll bring the whole model together. Also nice about this filtering process is you can be pretty haphazard and almost random with where you're putting these light points. You can focus them on rounded surfaces pointing upwards. That's the easiest way to do it. Keep your paint out of the recesses, obviously, and you can kind of shoot pretty general, and you just want to get these rounded parts. Once I have my highlight of green, I will move on to a flesh color, because I think flesh mixed in with this very light green is a nice combo. So I'm going to start putting that around the model on the parts I want to be fleshy and not this necrotic green. This is all done with an airbrush, but it could easily be done with a normal brush or even a dry brush. A lot of times I just use my airbrush because I have it out, and all my painting I do for my own simplicity, so it's an easy tool. I know how to use it, and I just go for it. Since I already have kind of purple in this scheme as a base color, dark base color, I thought I might as well do some purple on the wings. I think it's a nice contrast with the green in the skin, and we're also going to make these very bright using mixes of lavender and lilac in there, mixed in with some white to really bring out some contrast in the wings, and they'll look really good after a wash. There's a lot of winged units in this warband, which is pretty cool, a lot of fly wings. So again, I just want to make sure I highlight those with a different color than the necrotic green skin. So this is more of a yellow mixed in here to make kind of like a bug, sickly look on the wings. Here I'm just using more of the same palettes that I have with almost a wraith bone mixed in with the necrotic green. I'm just mixing in these colors and kind of highlighting any other parts of the model that I want to before I go to my wash filter step. But again, this is I'm just keeping things in, harmonious coloring here. As you can see, the model is very bright, which is what we're looking for, but there are slight differences in the colors, and once I put the wash over everything, it'll really separate those colors nicely. Now before we get to our wash, I just want to do really one last kind of pre-filter. So I'm going to use white ink through my airbrush, and I'm just going to do very specific highlights of this white ink over my model. These will be my highest highlights that I'll come in later with color to re-hit, but this will be my last pre-filter color on the skin and the highlights of the model. I did forget that I did need to do some other ink work, so while I'm after this step, I'm going to go right into that, which is basically adding some body horror gore in a sense, with a mix of red and magenta. I'm kind of, again, randomly shooting this around the flesh parts of the model. It shows like a sickly, even like open wound kind of color that I think is nice. You don't have to, it's not too gory, but it looks really good under the wash. Now that I have all my colors I need to spray through my airbrush, I'm just going to go in and cut in with any other colors I need. Accent colors, woods, metallics, any cloth. When you do all the work with the airbrush beforehand, this part is super easy because you're just hitting very specific things as we go, and we're just mixing onto the palette whatever colors we need. For my metallics, I just wanted to keep in the tone of greens. I wanted to do a green tinted metallic, so I just used some dark green ink with some Vallejo metal grange. This is burnt iron, and I'm just going to use this for pretty much all my metallics except for my blades. I'm going to keep that in a burnt iron so I can rust it later, and that's a nice effect as well. Moving on to my wash step, everything's going to get a generous coating of black brown pretty much all over the model. I'm going to keep that out of my skin though the best I can. There will be a little splash over, but it's okay, we can mix that in after. So all metallics, all armor, and most of the green skin is going to get a mix of black brown, and then I will use black and magenta mix, or we can use a black and red to go over any skin that is showing. As you can see, all the pre-work we did beforehand, really you can see it, the filtering of the wash really brings out all that work. It gives a lot of depth to it, darkening the entire model, but it looks very cool after, I think. after this wash starts to set in, you see all the work we did beforehand is showing through. Even though it's a pretty heavy wash, we can now start to see what we're going for here, and we can use makeup sponges to clean up what we need to after. This style it definitely takes a lot from Marco Frazzoni and the way he paints, and if you're used to watching his videos, you'll be like, okay, I see what this guy's doing. It's definitely it's definitely his speed painting light, because he does way more work. He's so much better with colors, and he's incredible. So my color ranges are limited in what I know I can mix together, so I'm doing my best to imitate him, but I think it's working, especially on the skin and the flesh tones. I think that really works nicely. Obviously, this piece being the big centerpiece looks the best when you start to wash it, because this obviously I spent the most time working on before this wash step, and I think it's looking fantastic even at this step. Now, after a full thorough cleaning and dry, I hit everything with a matte varnish before I start working again. First thing I'm going to do is kind of just work my way around the skin. I'm going to go right back to my base colors, because I don't need to bring up a ton of different colors here. I can even keep these a little dull in the sense, and it will read the way I want it to. So I'm just going to actually just use dry brushing for a lot of these. Some of the skin I'll come back in with a brush later to do some highlights, but I think the dry brush works great right here, because we not only just want to hit the edges, but a little blend is nice too. Now, when you're doing these kind of models, we did so much work before the wash step that even any really highlight work we do now is very subtle, and it really is going to get picked up in our contrast lighting, but it's still worth it at the end of the day, even though you might look at it and be like, okay, what am I doing here? But the highlights do work. It does help translate the look over onto the table, definitely. Before I do anything else, I just want to put some rust effects on here. So this is just Army Painter. I think this is the older rust effect, and it works great once it dries. It dries really, really matte, and gives you a nice rust effect. So for this guy, he has these cool tanks on his back, so I wanted to do a fun kind of like glowing tank effect. So really all you do here is you start off with a dark green and you just slowly glaze on more and more green into like a lime green, and you just focus lower and lower on the tank, and then you can come in with a white ink after and add some glow effects. And it works out good. It's a pretty cool effect. And as long as you glaze enough, it's a very subtle effect, which is what we're looking for. While I have my airbrush out, I'll just continue to put down some white. I'll continue to put down some white glow effect on around the model. I'm going to do a red for this because I think the red is a nice contrast with all the skin and the green that we have going on. So anything that's like a dripping blood or like the opened insides of this model. Also the base is kind of like abstract of, you know, these guys are all coming out of the ground here, so I'm just gonna hide a lot of that effect with a nice red glow. I'm just gonna use red paint mixed with some red fluorescence, and it'll get the job done. Here's the finished models. I think they came out pretty good. When you think about finding your own process, I mean, the short end of it is basically just watching and learning and reading and figuring out which way works for you the best. I tend to lean more to these pre-filter ways because I use my airbrush so much, but if I didn't have an airbrush, I'd probably try to fall back to maybe more of a heavy metal paint style, or I'd probably look at maybe like a dirty slap chop, something like that, where it works for you and your needs and your time constraints. I like to try to speed as much as I can because it's for work, and the more I do, the more I get paid. So that's kind of why I lean so heavy on the airbrush all the time. But you know, you find what works for you after a long time, and YouTube is great for that because you can just kind of watch people do it, be like, all right, that looks reasonable, I can try that. I think this painting style is very reasonable, that's why I do it. I think it's one of my faster ways. The only other thing I can think that might be faster is a true like slap chop with oil. Like a true slap chop with oil might be the fastest that I can do, but I'm really liking how these models come out with what I'm doing now. So it works for me. If it works for you, that's great, but at the end of the day, you got to find out what works for you also. If you liked the video, please share, send it around. Community is always growing, which is great. We've over the past few months, we've bumped up a lot of subscribers here, which is very cool. I hope everyone really likes the content, and I'll keep putting it out. I have lots of fun stuff coming, and catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.